welcome Mr. Mike Oakes, Senior Pre-Sales Engineer at Atempo. Mike, are you there?
I am, David. How are you doing today?
Great. Mike, it's good to have you back on again. Take it away.
Hey, thanks. All right. Well, hey, thanks, David. And again, thanks to the team for inviting us here to participate. Also, real quickly, thanks to everyone who joined, and I hope you're staying safe and healthy, especially in the current COVID crisis we're going. As David mentioned, my name is Mike Oakes. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect with Atempo, and I've been in the compute, storage, data preservation, and protection about 30 plus years now. And when I do these, what I'd like to do real quickly is a brief introduction about Atempo, followed by a closer look at our disaster recovery protection products for the healthcare market space. So that being said, who's Atempo? Right? What is Atempo? So Atempo, we bring to bear over 30 plus years now of experience in the field of data protection, data migration, management. As you notice on the slide here, 2,000 plus customers worldwide, north of 200 employees. And our solutions are designed to basically protect, store, facilitate movement, provide easy searchable functionality, a quick retrieval of data of assets when needed from wherever needed. And I want to put a quick note in here. These solution sets I'm talking about, we are a software company. We don't provide any hardware. We do have guides, sizing guidelines, and so forth. And I'm not talking about big hardware because you can reuse your own, repurpose what you have. It's basically we're talking about a virtual machine with some vCPUs in memory, depending on the workflow, base metal, 1U, 2 CPUs, some cores, a little bit of memory. So not large boxes. And again, you get to repurpose what you have at the facility site, as well as if you need to grow the solution, there's no more cost from us for what we call data movers or agents. You simply just need to add those. You already have the software and you're good to go. So that being said, why did I make a few comments about Atempo beforehand? So what happened some years back, we took a look at the industry from the data management protection challenges, so to speak. We saw some crucial things we thought needed to be addressed. Of course, the big one for all of us these days, right, is data security integrity. How do I keep it protected? How do I ensure it's protected? How do I ensure its authenticity? But on top of that, coupled with that, right, full audit logging, right, audit trail audit logging for all data accesses, right? And it comes into play too, not just because, you want to know what's going on from day to day. What happens? You have to do some forensic analysis because something happened in your system. Somebody did something, a record disappeared or something along those lines. So logging all those accesses, logging all those data transactions was a crucial element to have in the product. You'll see two things here, multiple vendors, multiple file systems. So most organizations have a homogeneous environment, different types of data silos. How to bring all those together, and we call a heterogeneous architecture. Now we're file-based, not block, so we work on a file system-based level. But also, we saw the need for cloud or on-premise storage, right? Depending on what your business model is and your security requirements, it may not be able to go to public cloud. You want to keep it in private cloud. So how do you utilize that effectively and efficiently within your architecture? As well as the big one at the bottom, which also goes to security again, is air-gapped storage. A lot of people, when you think air-gapped, they'll think tape, right? Taking tape, having your backup or an archive or some other type of copy of the data, pulling it out of the system and putting it somewhere in a vault, sending it out to Iron Mountain or some other place, right? So I'm fully protected and I'm air-gap protected, so nobody can get to my data after the fact once it's been actually protected and preserved. So that being said, how do we do that? Myria, there's basically 4 pillars, and we're actually adding a 5th, and it's an analytics package. I'll talk about that coming up. But these 4 pillars here that you see on the screen, the 12 o'clock and the 6 o'clock position, this is what we've been doing for 30 plus years now, 30 years now, right? Backup and archive, data preservation, data protection. The product has evolved over time, adding new feature sets, new enhancements, but we've been doing this now for almost 30 years. We added, coupled to the left and the right, you'll see at the 9 o'clock position something called Mirror for data moving. Think of this as synchronization, replication, manual copy, manual moves, right? All the things you may want to have automated and also manual within the tool that can interface both to archiving and backup projects if need be. And then to the right, you'll see something called Mirror for migration. Think of this as you're actually purchasing, but only for a set amount of time, maybe 6 months to do a migration because you need to collapse infrastructure. You need to safely and securely migrate data off of an older piece of storage, some legacy piece of storage, something newer, bigger, faster, better analytics in it. Right? This is the tool for that. You use it for a set amount of time, and we train people up to do this all the time themselves or through one of our partners. You have a license for the software, you have a license for the capacity moving, and after maybe it's 6 months, it'll shut down and be done. So think of that as like a term base for the length of a project, where the other 3 pillars you see there are perpetual, and now we're moving more to a subscription model where it's support year over year and you license for the product. So how do we do some of those things I talked about in the previous slides? How do we improve or reduce that window of vulnerability for data or detect anomalies? There's some tools we do under the hood that come with the product natively. You'll see here it mentions a couple of things. One of them is data movement, parallelization of tasks, and multi-threading. One of the biggest things to do when trying to archive or backup or get data between 2 points, there's always that window of vulnerability till something's secured on the other side. We can, while we're looking for data, we'll say we're scanning a file system. We can, there's some algorithms and some tunables or dials under the hood that you can set to say, after so much time that's run looking for data, or so many files have been found to be acted upon or moved or backed up or archived, or so much data, so the capacity. Fire up a job, start that transaction, and continue looking for more data. And we'll do this, and it's basically the notion of a task and sub-jobs. And you can set X amount of sub-jobs under the hood. We can then pool, we call those data movers or agents, and those are what are moving data between point A and point B. If I pool these together, I can start setting jobs across each one of those every time I reach one of those thresholds. So now I'm moving data, I'm looking for data, I'm parallelized across my data movers, and now under the hood, I mentioned vCPUs and cores earlier, in some of the architecture, we can start to turn those on the data movers into copy engines. So I parallelized across my data movers, I'm multi-threading through my data movers, I'm thereby reducing my data transaction window and reducing my window of vulnerability dramatically down. Coupled with that, these 2 tools at the bottom, one called Snapshot, one called FastScan. We have the ability, if we can talk to the API of a product that does snapshotting, maybe it's an Isilon, maybe it's a Cumulo, NetApp, GPFS, something else. We can have, when we're walking that file system, the first seed, the first time we do some type of transaction, take a snapshot, and we'll walk that snapshot to validate it. Once it's validated, at the end of the job, we'll mark it good. The very next time you have to run, we'll take another snapshot. And then we'll use the FastScan tool to say, give me a delta compare of the differences. I don't need to walk the file system. The snapshot will tell me. No tree walking of the file system anymore. So they take 5 minutes. We get that change list from the appliance. We import it, and we parse it out immediately to the data movers for action to start moving the data. Again, why? Dramatically reducing that window of vulnerability. Gets your data protected that much quicker. So there's one other tool. And this one's really cool. It's called SnapStore. Now think of this as I can use my backup as an active, basically, DR. In this case, what you see here on the screen is I have users, finance, everything, management, analytics, all running on my production storage in the middle. I have a backup repository off to the right, the little green disk and 2 blue ones. I'm using that now, maybe the same size as my production, and maybe smaller, it may be dissimilar. Maybe I'm going from a Cumulo to a NetApp or a GPFS to a Cumulo. I just need to be able to talk to the APIs. If I can do that, in the event of a failure, I have an automatic backup running all the time going to this backup storage. Should a failure happen for some particular reason, nefarious act, network goes down, an array goes offline, what can happen is now you've lost access. The IT staff can immediately, depending on how you do your authentication and access to storages, can say, okay, point to this new storage and immediately start running on it. You get 2 benefits. One, of course, immediate uptime, right, or immediate recovery. But 2, think of this as also a time navigation backup copy that you can also use to pull files back, hold directories, or reconstitute a file system from a particular point in time. But what I said previously, though, you've bought yourself some time. You can now figure out what happened at production. Was it really a nefarious act? Was something else happened? Just lost the network connectivity. Let's get it back up online, or let's have to rebuild it completely from scratch. You reconstitute that file system. Once you do, you can start to say, now build back all the data that belongs in that reconstituted structure. Right? And because it has a notion of time navigation, maybe something bad happened at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. You want to go back till midnight on Tuesday. You set it that way. You set to say recover at this point. It'll reconstitute the file system back down. Once that's done, even though you're still running on the NAS backup, so you're doing both in parallel, right? Parallelization is important. Once it's done, you repoint your users back to your normal production, and you reinitiate SnapStore going the other way. Fully protected. And on top of that, if you want to have air gap protection, you can also be putting stuff out to tape. We have notions that we call storage manager containers. A container is just a location to put data. These locations have independent hashes. You can have a global if you want. I always recommend independent hash for security and data integrity, because if any one file doesn't match, you can pull it from somewhere else. So coupled with that, there's a new GUIs we're coming out with. We're getting away from the notion of having a 6-in client running on a laptop that you have to manage, right? Get to an HTTPS web-based client. You could be an administrator, you could be assigned as a user. When you log in, you only see those things that you're allowed to have access to. In this case, I just want to show you a quick example of this. Myriad, this is a backup UI. You see easy move at the top. Think of that as Myriad copy, sync, and move. You have migration in the middle. That's that one at 3 o'clock we saw for migration. And you have at the bottom repositories. Think of that as archive and backup. In this case, we have a repository we want to go into called video backup. And you see there's a file down there called dinner.mov or diner.mov, however you want to pronounce it. You decided, I want to go get that file for some reason. And you can search on these. You see a search button in the upper right. You can start to search on file names, owner, criteria, all kinds of information. When you go to select that file, you notice there's 7, 8 instances in the database. You want a particular one. You may not want the latest. You may want to go back 4. And you may want to put it other than where it originally came from. You can all do this under the tool. You basically select that file. Right? You'll see here, this is the notion that's moved into that. I said it integrates with Easy Sync, or copy, move, and sync integrates with backup and archive. You can select what location you want it to go to. In this case, we're going to move it to a Windows machine different than its original location. You basically do a pull down, select where you want it to go to, update the basket or validate the basket down below after you add it, and it will go off and move the data. I probably went through pretty quickly, but also if there's hashes assigned with that, you'll get hashes. You'll get all kinds of metadata information for that particular file when you select on it. So you can take a look at things too. If you're concerned about the hash, you're concerned about the date, the time, the owner, the group, whatever, you can start looking at all that information. Now, coupled with that, I mentioned we're adding analytics to the package, and this is coming in Q4 of this year. And we did this for some very specific reasons. You can't understand the data landscape if you don't fully have a picture of it, right? What are my data silos? Where are they at? How are they located, right? So we're putting that in. This is coming with the tool there's no added cost. It's your data. You need to be able to manage it. We're a data management protection organization, company. So, and this is just one example of a dashboard. This one happens to be looking at time and age and reparations, but you can build your own dashboards. And this was important because we wanted to put into the product some very specific things. You can't do analytics without understanding some things. And to understand that, you first have to discover, right? I have to discover all of my infrastructure, not just things a Tempo currently has access to that we're doing archive and backup, or the Myria is doing archive and backup too, but you can go out and look at all of your storage, basically putting a fingerprint on that, in getting all or signing a fingerprint to it, and pulling all that information in so you can start the next phase, right? And that's analyzing the data, right? And I'm going to talk about what gets analyzed and what you can do in a second. But once that analysis happens, you need to be able to decide on what to do, right? I manually want to archive things, or I want to tag things. I automatically want to have things happen. That all goes into the act phase. Now, release 1, Everything you can tag, you can do everything manual movement. Release 2 will allow you to start to make business decisions and say, I have certain criteria that are being met, and I want this metadata to be fed into, this analysis fed into a decision model to start acting upon it automatically. Now, some of that action and discovery gets into when you start to analyze what's hot, what's cold, right? Localization of data, data usage and age, and all these kind of tie together a little bit. And I'll use this as an example because maybe I want to start saying I have a production storage or production storages, and anything that's on them over 6 months, we never touch. It does not need to be sitting on there, but I need it backed up. I need it protected. I need hashes with it. I need to understand it. But I want to move it out to an archive, and I want to delete it immediately once I do, or I want to move it out to multiple copies somewhere and maybe immediately delete it off my production or wait 30 days. You get the choice. You can make those decisions in your business model and assign those algorithms, those variables. But anything that's 6 months and earlier, I want to back it up. I want to keep it here. I want a hot copy of it so I can use it, right? You can start to set up those business models to start acting upon that information. Duplicate files, there's no sense of keeping 17 copies if you only need 4 for your business model. And maybe it's 4, but in 2 are in secured locations. The big one here is detect anomalies, just one of the big ones. You don't need to know on a file system when something has gone right. 90% of the time, things go great, that's good. Administrators are busy, IT personnel are busy. But you need to know when something doesn't happen. The classic example I use is on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock, I'm supposed to get a 2 terabyte dump from a particular location, or something is supposed to happen. I'm getting a dump from a microscopy examination or something. It doesn't happen. Now, I need to know that. So the tool, this analytics tool, is constantly learning about your data patterns. And I want to be specific about something. None of this data leaves your facility with the analytics. This goes back to security, data integrity. It's your data. Nothing goes out to the cloud for analysis. It all stays on site. You keep control of it, and that's important. And the last thing it talks about here is data tagging, group insights, run tasks, and so forth. Talked about that. I can set things. I want to tag things for archive, tag things for backup, delete, copy, move, sync. You can do all this within the analytics product, and then it will be fed into, in the second release, automated processes within Miriam. Why did we do all that? Because of what we saw early on, right? Data protection, large data protection. Be able to manage multiple petabytes, hundreds of petabytes of data, right? That security I just talked about had to be inherent, and it has to be met within the product. Availability, that's a given. There's nothing worse that at 3 in the morning you have an issue and you can't get to that copy of the data, that backup, that archive. So things need to be accessible 7 by 24, 365, right? It's any data, anywhere, anytime. You need to be able to access it. Talked about analytics. That's to understand your data landscape and basically build a model that fits the best utilization for your organization. You need to understand that, and that goes straight into cost savings. The cost savings, think about if I have storages in multiple locations and they're busy from 6 in the morning to 6 at night, but 6 at night to 6 in the morning, they're completely idle. Can I use them for something else? Can they be a short-term WIP bin for somebody that's running in a different area or different time zone? So efficiently using the infrastructure that you have without having to go out and repurchase new infrastructure. So with that, got one more slide here. So why us? Right? So I just talked about it. We've been doing this 30 years now, managing multi-petabyte, 100 petabyte data management, data protection, archive, backup. Right? Again, global player, but right below that, wide range of supported technologies. What does this mean? So taking those homogeneous data silos, infrastructures, somebody's cloud, somebody's NAS, somebody's file system, and putting them together to be used in a heterogeneous environment to meet the workflow requirements, demands of the organization efficiently, reducing window of vulnerability, reducing user impact, right? User experience. Important feature set, right? Cost effective. If I can reuse what I have instead of have to go out there and basically do a forklift upgrade when a new project rolls in or new data sets are showing up, that's important. I get to save money. I return on my investment on what I have. analytics to understand the data. If you don't understand the data landscape, you cannot manage it. You can't make those important, critical business decisions. And the last one, and I mentioned this again, 3 in the morning. We have organizations in Europe, the United States, and Asia. When you have an issue and you need our help, you need someone to be there. And this is critical. Again, it goes back to any data, anywhere, anytime. We want to be there. There's nothing worse than feeling left alone. You have to get to a piece of data, and for some reason you're not able to access it. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to my friend David for any questions.
Great presentation, Mike. We do appreciate that. We do have some questions for you, and while we do that, I've got a couple of poll questions out here for the audience. First question on the screen now is, what's the volume of your petascale data set? And I'll leave that up while we take your questions. So don't forget about our best question prize as well. I see lots of good questions that have already come in. We appreciate that. Let's start off with this one. They're asking about, is the solution application aware? Does it have insight into the applications that are accessing this data or the applications that it's protecting?
So it's aware of the data. It can be aware of the applications from the analytics standpoint, but from a backup and archive standpoint, we're concerned about the data and getting that pushed out to where it needs to be.
Got it. Okay. Another question here. What's the best practice or minimum requirement to run a tempo if they were to deploy it?
All depends on the workflow, but you can start off very small. It's usually one server, like I said, a 1U box, we'll call it a server, 2 CPUs, X amount of cores in memory. The data movers, they're the same configuration but less disk space. And one thing to note, if you need to grow with your workflow, adding data movers from us is free. Once you have the software, you can add virtual machines or base metal machines as data movers to fill out your workflow as needed. Starts fairly cheap.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that sounds easy. And then there's another question here. Can this help to either protect from or recover after a ransomware infection?
Yes. So there's a couple of things that happen. With the analytics packages coming, we're taking a look at crypto lockers and data patterns that are happening within your, say, a data silo, all your data silos. We'll recognize, we know some patterns of some, but we'll start to recognize other patterns. And we'll start to warn you, hey, you need to start thinking about these files have been infected, or you need to start bringing some files back and deleting these because there's an issue. With the time navigation feature that's available within SnapStore and all of our backup products, you can go back in time if for some reason a file, some ransomware got in the system, and at 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, you can back that whole thing back up to, say, 12 o'clock that night and basically wipe everything out and reconstitute that if need be, or a particular file. You can get granular. It can be a whole file system or down to a single file.
Excellent. And then next question here, does Miria have any size or scaling limitations?
No. Like I said, we do hundreds of petabytes now, and the data movers can scale out to be used as you need. Some of our biggest workflow right now, a couple hundred petabytes, and about 20 plus data movers doing different functions. Nice,
nice. And then is the time navigation an add-on feature, or is it something that has to be licensed separately?
No, it's included.
All
the
right.
only thing you have to license with the product, think about, is I'm doing a particular workflow, whether it be backup or archive, and the capacity of it. Everything else pretty much is included within the product. There's not extra fees added on.
Excellent. And then what type of data can be collected with the analytic discovery agent?
So basically, all information that pertains to the metadata of a file, right? That includes file size, who owns it, UID, GID if you're thinking POSIX, ACL information if you're thinking Windows, and any other gatherable information. There's a list of them, and it's more than I can talk about here on one call. But you get a full picture of that file and everything it's done since its life cycle in the appliance.
Excellent. And then, let's see, here's a question. Do you support Wasabi or Azure storage?
Both. So Wasabi, Azure, GCP, any type of S3, Swift, AWS, including Glacier and Deep Glacier. So we're pretty much across all the major players, as well as you can use generic on-site stuff.
Okay. And then I want to call everyone's attention again to the slides window there. I just brought up the second poll question that just says, what additional information would you like about the A-Tempo solution? Another question here. Does the analytics package help with tiering?
Yes, because if you know where data is and where it doesn't need to be, you can start basically putting things into, whether it be manual or automated, to say, this cold data doesn't need to be on tier 1, put it on tier 2, or maybe put it on tier 2 and send a copy to tape or cloud or some other storage manager container. So you get pretty granular of what you move and where you move it, and tiering it all the way down through its data lifecycle.
Great. And then what about, can the analytics package also help with data sprawl? I know a lot of companies, they have a primary data set, then a secondary, then a testing, and then they create multiple copies of that, and then over time, their data set size has just exploded.
Right. So basically, you talk about replicas, right? So how many copies do I have of in all these different locations? And you can have dashboards that go through and show you all that. You can have actions upon that. I will only keep 4 copies instead of 44 copies. You can decide where they go, right? So it gets, again, pretty granular on what you can look at. And again, making those key decision or business metrics that best fit the organization so don't keep so many copies laying around.
Nice. And then what's the licensing model for Myria? Is it based on the amount of data that's managed, or how does that work?
So from a perspective of, and I'm going to talk about the archive, backup, copy, sync, and move, it's all just basically based on capacity. You license the server, you license the capacity and the workflow you need to do, and after that, everything else is pretty much included. Right? You support, if it's in your subscription model, support's included and so forth.
Nice. And then there's a question here, how does Myria's data protection compare to other data protection solutions in the industry? What do you feel really makes it unique?
So the first thing I'll say is I talked about this earlier. So multiple buckets, different hashes, and you choose the hashes, right? So you can protect that data going up, and also we'll read those independent hashes coming down to always guarantee the data integrity. Coupled with that, on transaction, I see something on the screen about, how do we ensure data validity moving between 2 targets. We'll use XX hash 64 in line when we're doing transfers or migrations or movements to check the data on a read. We'll check the data again on just after we write to make sure it matches the hash. We'll do it twice. We'll calculate that hash twice. We'll also, if you need to, we'll encrypt that data in flight. So if you have 2 locations, New York and London, I have data that I need to move to the other. You have data movers on both sides, or agents. You can tell us to encrypt on the ingest of the data. We'll decrypt when we get it to the other side and apply it down to that particular storage. Coupled with what's coming later this year for storages that can't do encryption at rest, we're going to start putting it in the product so you can do encryption at rest natively through us instead of having to do it natively on the appliance that doesn't, because it doesn't support it.
Very cool. Some innovative features there. I like that. All right. Well, Mike, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our live Q&A, but really great presentation. Again, thank you so much for being on.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks, David.